Okay, cool. Right, so for those of you who were in Glasgow for Academy last year, this is going to be the illegitimate love child of the talk I gave there with the talk that Claire Lotion gave about research within the KDE community. And before what this is really about, I'm going to start with a question. If I hit the right button. How far have we got with the desktop in the 30-ish years since the GUI was really kind of born? And I'm willing to offer a big cash prize for whoever can give me a reasonable answer. Aids run away with the mic. Okay, come on, help me out here. How far have we got in 30 years? No answer can be too stupid. Parity with commercial desktops. Nice, but doesn't come in the correct units, so you don't get the big cash prize.
It's almost the same as you had in 1973.
Almost the same as we had in 1973.
And the first,
You are probably going to win the big cash prize. You didn't give me the units, but...
It's called Xerox device, the first PC ever.
Any one more answer?
7 parsecs.
7 parsecs, at least it's given in a sensible unit-ish, but it's totally the wrong order of magnitude. Right, okay, you win the big cash prize.
Thank you.
$1 US. I've got another competition later on for £1, so it's twice the value. Okay, right. How far have we got? We've got 6.3 miles. Xerox Park is just up the road. And really kind of, has it actually really changed all that much? It has, ish. I'm going to come back to it a little bit later on. What this is really all about, and really kind of what I want hopefully people to take away from my talk, is that as a community, we are excellent at development. It's what we do. It's the very nature of us. And we're also now mature enough as a world, the free software world, that we do the other stuff as well. So it's not just about development anymore. We do our marketing, we do our artwork, we do our sounds, we do the whole shebang. But something yet as a community that we've still not quite got a grasp of, although it's a lot better now than it has been in the past, is it's actually about doing research, whether informally or formally, in order to improve the development that we're doing to make awesome products. And actually the free software world, KDE is actually better than most out there. So really what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about kind of what's actually going on in KDE in terms of research, where I'd like to kind of see things go in terms of integrating the culture of research into the project, and there'll be stories about fish heads and stuff on the way. Okay, so briefly, a little bit about me. I'm the head of research and development for a company called Sirius. Sirius is a supporting member of the EV. My particular interest is in software quality, is my particular thing I'm working on just now, and more long-term, I'm particularly interested in how agility is implemented by free software projects and what the ramifications are in that for the final product. I also do other free software stuff with the British Computer Society. I could tell you about that over a beer. Okay, so what's not really changed all that much in the past 30 years? Icons. I really love icons. Not. I want content, so why do I have to have this little thing which is kind of like the gatekeeper to the content? It's been around for 30 years now, and yet we still click on these things. Why are we not just being presented with content that's scalable? If I want to make it small like that, So icons are still about, they've not really changed much in 30 years. Yeah, they have aesthetically and stuff like that, but they're still gatekeepers to content. Menus. They're still about. They've not really changed much either. Again, aesthetically, yes. But they're still there, sitting at the top of your window, doing menu-type stuff. Pointers. It's kind of really hard to change them. Yes, again, aesthetically, they look nice. They do magic widgetry thing to let you know what the system's up to. But fundamentally, they just point at stuff. And that's pretty much what they're always going to do. It's nice now that we have things like, multi-point and stuff like that, but fundamentally we have things that point at stuff. They've not changed. Maybe they won't change. Maybe they don't need to change, but let's face it, they've not changed much in 30 years. What has changed? Windows. So doing the whole KDE4 plug thing now. Plasma, and in particular the plasmoids on the desktop, are great because we effectively just got rid of the windows. I want a clock on my desktop, so just give me the clock. I don't want a square box around it which says clock. I'm pretty well aware that the clock is a clock. So Plasma, awesome because people like stuff and they don't want the frippery. And it's really good. It basically says, give me the content, and I'm not going to worry about the rest because I know my clock's a clock. And it's fantastic. And that's a really good thing to come out of the development of KDE4. Search. So Strigi is going to be something I'll come back to a bit later because of Nepomuk. But Strigi is really important because people like to find stuff. Now, historically, people put things in the file system, and they had folders and hierarchies of folders and folders within folders. And we kind of forced that upon ourselves. People don't necessarily think that way. So having the ability to tag our content and say, come back later on and say, I want pictures of giraffes that have been sent to me by John Terpstra, then you can do that. And that's really important that content is something that we can get easily, considering now we are all sitting in front of computers as content consumers. Multimediary stuff, for want of a better term. Yeah, phone on, because I just want to listen to my music and I don't want to have to configure 1,000,001 backends to, you know, make the universe of sound work. In my sort of consultancy work in the past, I've done stuff with LTSP where trying to get sound to work over a network to a thin client is an absolute nightmare. And it's kind of, you just want it to work because people, it's content. People sometimes forget musical content because you can't see it. But it's there and people want to consume it. So again, things like phone on really make life better for ourselves. And it's, again, it's something in the desktop world which really has changed, and it's really important that it has done. It's not my laptop. The battery's dead. It's a sad story. Dude, it's not plugged in.
Oh, no, that's not the one.
Where's your plug?
That's... Sorry about that.
That's right, I forgive you. I have made myself look foolish in the past in much more glorious ways than having a laptop run out on
I
there.
suppose I'm going to have to log in for you, huh?
Absolutely. I could so make a joke, but it'd be far too rude.
Exactly. You can.
Sorry about that.
I'd just like to make a statement about...
Why you paid the
Yeah. Absolutely. Make the guy from Sirius look foolish. I'd just like to say that Hewlett-Packard make fantastic laptops. The battery life is phenomenal. I would never, ever substitute my Lenovo for one of these. X works first time. Awesome. Okay, given that the video works, I would actually switch my Lenovo for one of these. Okay, so this is KDE 4.0. You may have heard of it.
The one like scrunching in. If you
Sweet. Great.
There you go.
Cameo from Cunningham, everybody. Now I just have to remember where I was. Oh, I was here. Safe. Okay, right, yes. So here's where it all breaks down. Floor of the metaphor. The desktop. My actual desktop, my physical desk, does not have windows on it. It doesn't have icons on it either. And it must certainly, well, okay, Friday night, it does have menus on it. It does have pointers. When I've talked about this in the past, and people say, well, your desktop doesn't have pointers on it. Desktops do have pointers on because, well, at least when I'm sitting at it, because I have my pointers. But yeah, Windows icons and menus, they're kind of a bit rare to find them on desks. There's the proof. So yeah, why do we still insist on putting them, like why do we still have the WIMP paradigm within the desktop metaphor, or maybe it's the metaphor and paradigm should be the other way down, I don't know. But why are we still doing this 30 years later? Why are we not making it easier for ourselves to get to the content in the age of, content consumers? So that's just a question. Really what I want to talk about today is kind of like, how does research work in a free software world, or how can it work, and what are kind of the ramifications for KDE? And when people think about research, they think about, sort of the academics sitting on their pedestals, thinking lofty thoughts, not getting paid enough, but they have a very nice lifestyle and all that kind of stuff. It couldn't be more wrong. What it's really about is just using your head and using your imagination and asking interesting questions. Using your imagination is not very hard. Just another side of things you can get away with. People shouldn't be afraid to think stupid things, and I really do mean that. When I was about 8, my father works in R&D for the printing industry, and his company makes ink for these big, massive printers. And the printers are designed so that you're not just doing like 10 copies of something at once, thousands. And they're quite a decent size. So actually companies put them in their company offices to do like prints of internal newsletters for, around the office and stuff like that. And I said to my dad one day, I bet secretaries sit by these machines for ages. They go and they start a job, and rather than go do something else, they should just sit there. So why do the machines not dispense cheese? I was 8 and I really like cheese. My dad laughed and thought the whole thing was really funny. But now, some years later, okay, the machines do not dispense cheese, but they do actually have functionality to have people entertained while the copying process goes on, because it takes a long time. So people should really not be afraid to think stupid thoughts, because sometime later they might actually be really important to whoever. The other thing is about asking interesting questions. Now, asking interesting questions is not necessarily about, okay, okay, examples. All right, so we have high-level questions. The other thing I should probably say about interesting, of course, it is subjective. I'm suggesting these might be interesting to some people. So go back to my first example. Okay, so what are the viable alternatives to the WIMP paradigm and desktop metaphor? Now, thankfully, we're starting to see these kind of questions answered. Like any of you who've ever had the chance to play with an XO, the desktop metaphor has been kind of thrown out the window, and they're phenomenal little devices to play with. I would never suggest that the metaphor they use is actually going to work for people in their offices or whatever. But it's really good, and people have thought about what's really going to work for the end user of those devices. We then have sort of lower level questions. Something a bit more relevant to KDE here. Why do we get rid of file dialogues which allow us to choose files, save files, etc., and just provide stringy search boxes instead? Why do we still have the option to go through the file system and go into that folder and into that folder and then choose a file? Why not just search for content? So instead of going file open and getting your usual file chooser, why not just present stringy, and people could just say John Terpstra giraffe and get what it was they were looking for. From here, we then have a lower level. We have the questions which are kind of like the most fundamental, where simply thinking and asking these questions causes wave functions to collapse and Schrödinger's cat to be let out of the box. And we end up with things like, who knew that Sebastian Kogler had a 3-piece suit? Research really can be informal, and this is something I really want to impress on people today. Doing a PhD or a master's or whatever in order to train yourself to actually be a researcher is really nice if research is your chosen path. I'm a software engineer by training, but research was kind of like my chosen path. I mentioned before my father was a researcher. He kind of brought me up that way. And it was kind of inevitable I was going to be this way. It's who I am. But, you know, the community is mostly made up of artists, software developers, etc. We're not career researchers. So doing a PhD is great, but it's a lot of hard work. It's not necessary for everyone. But you don't need one. Aid has just finished his PhD. He's submitted it. He's waiting for the great and good to tell him how wonderful it is.
It's wonderful. It's at the printer.
It's at the printer. On a scale of 1 to 10, how hard can it be?
8.
8. Okay, his PhD was easier than mine. They really can be tough sometimes. They're not for everyone, but they don't need to be. People inside KDE are already doing unashamedly cool stuff without necessarily having any kind of formal training whatsoever. This is something I just reaped off the blog a few days ago. I scaled back my hardware just to see what would happen with KDE4. It's a really awesome question to ask when you consider that, you know, if you're sitting there with your laptop developing something nice, you've got the shiny new kit, but you realize, of course, that there's lots of people using older kit out there. It's a really important question to ask. Someone had the guts to ask the question and then do a little bit of experimentation, not necessarily formally, but just say, here's what I found. And it's really important that the community gets its head around doing this kind of work and communicating it so people know what's really going on in our development. I was talking with Aaron Saigo at Academy, and he was just saying stuff like, you know, he pays attention to the commit rates in KDE and GNOME, and how, you know, here in KDE we have a culture of more frequent, smaller commits compared to GNOME, where there are less frequent but larger commits, which, you know, as we all know, the release early, commit often mantra is obviously something that most people kind of subscribe to. And so it says something about what goes on in KDE. And again, things like the EBN, just keeping a track of what's going wrong and how much stuff do we have to fix. It's not formal, but it's something that people should get their heads around and start thinking about, because ultimately it's all going to help make KDE even more awesome than it already is. There is formal stuff going on, and this is where KDE is really ahead of the curve with the rest of the project. KDE's taken a part in a project called Squash. I'm hoping most people have heard of Squash by now. Hands up if you've not heard of Squash. Damn. Hi, my name's Paul Adams. I work for a company called Sirius, and we're the chief disseminator of the Squash project. For the past, how long has it been now, 18 months? 18 months, Squash has been alive, and we still have not much to show for it. So we got 2.5 million euros from the European Commission, which is not a small amount of money by any stretch of the imagination. What's really nice about it is the EV actually got funding, and this is where KDE is really kind of ahead of the curve, was that the organization which kind of represents KDE actually got money from the European Commission basically to do work that's going to help make KDE better. It's phenomenal. What we're doing is we're building a tool which is, we're basically sort of re-engineering Coverity. I think that's kind of the short version of it. If people want to know more about it, please come and talk to me afterwards. It's not really kind of what I meant to talk about today. But we're basically building a new system which looks at how can we evaluate software quality automatically and spew out results which actually mean something to people, because what we all think about quality is very different. So the idea is to have a system where you can tell it what you think makes something good quality, and then it lets you know if the code and all the other data that you can get out of a project actually lets you know if that code meets your expectations of quality. And that's what Squash is really about. EPOMOC. Right, we all know it, we all love it. 11.5 million euros. Okay, that's a huge amount of money. And although the EV is not a partner in this project, and it's obviously a much larger project, it's a longer project, that's 11.5 million euros, which is basically, you know, indirectly gone into the KDE back pocket. And I think we're all kind of aware of the influence that this project has had on KDE 4.0 and how it's going to continue to have impact for some time to come. It's really important work. it's interesting science. It's making us think differently about how we produce our software, why we produce our software, and most importantly, it's about how do we get content and help people get content better, and what content actually means to the system. And it's really important work. So, how can people get involved with research in KDE? The first thing I'd say, just simply go and talk to the people who are doing it. And ask them questions, tell them things, what means something to you, and what are the problems that you think would be interesting to solve. So please, Aid, Sebas, they're both being paid by a Greek university to work on the Squash project as part of that funding. Please feel free to come up and talk to me about things that you think might be interesting problems that would help make KDE better. I'm always willing to hear these things. Come and play with the other KDE researchers online. There is KDE-research. It's a list of much promise, low traffic. So if you want to come along, talk about things there, please do. And if you don't want to play with the other researchers, play with yourself. Aaron Saigo does. And Aaron does not post very much to KDE. Has Aaron ever posted to KDE research?
No.
I don't think he has. However, I talked to him at Academy. He was actually doing some pretty cool stuff just by himself. So if you don't want to work with others, seriously, just do it for yourself. If it helps you learn something more about the product you're developing, then go for it, because it's only going to help make things better. The other thing, and this is the really important one, share the crazy ideas. If you want KDE to dispense cheese, say so now, because in 10 years' time, people may want the KDE cheese dispenser. And there are also places where you can actually go and work with researchers kind of outside the KDE spheres if you want to share some crazy ideas. Those of you who go to FOSDEM, there's a research room at FOSDEM where a lot of these projects like Squash, NepoMerc, other European funded things that have been funded by the NSF here in the United States, we all kind of get together. The idea is to actually physically bring our scientific results to the free software community so people can turn around to us and say, what the hell were you smoking? It's important we get that kind of feedback, because if we as researchers just kind of say magic things and it doesn't really relate, then... So, research room at FOSDEM. The other one, and this is a new initiative which isn't actually quite started yet, but keep an eye out for researchfriendly.org. The academic community, and I really mean kind of the academic community, is not necessarily as well in with the free software community like the background I have, need to know how to work with the free software community better. And how to solve problems that are interesting to the free software community, and how to helpfully get data out of the free software community without getting in the way of what we do. So I'd suggest also, I'm not quite sure when it's due to be up, I think it's about a month or so time, researchfriendly.org. It's going to be a way of finding out how to work better with the research community and what it means for improving your project. Okay, here's the big one. Big companies, the proprietary firms which do all their development and have lots of R&D money behind them, actually cannot afford to be too adventurous, because they have shareholders who quite often fear change. There are people out there who would gladly do all sorts of crazy stuff in their hidden away proprietary world, but then ultimately can't because they have customers who pay a lot of money who have expectations, and quite often one of those expectations is continuity. Therefore, you very rarely see massive radical changes in the proprietary world. And look at Vista. Okay, enough said. Okay, they can't afford to do anything too exciting for the fear of what their shareholders might say. And even better, they're spending too long stealing each other's ideas anyway. And this is the real killer of innovation in the proprietary world, because they can't even say, can I attach a cheese dispenser? Because they're too busy looking at the other guy and saying, no, his dispenser's fruit. Okay, they're so busy nicking each other's ideas, and they're not looking at the bigger picture, and not necessarily looking at what's going to deliver something new and sexy and exciting that's going to make the world a better place. They really cannot afford to do it. And this is our strong point. So where the free software community really has a chance to make a huge difference And we really have for quite some time now. I mean, very simple things like, you know, tabs in your web browser. Okay, we got there first. All right, just little things like that make a huge difference. So we can afford to ask the cheese dispenser question now. They really can. So we shouldn't be afraid to do so, because it's going to make a huge difference later on when, let's face it, the war will be won. And the real reason, and this is kind of the one thing I really, really, really want you to walk away with today, is that we can do this. I've always had this feeling that research within the free software community is one of these things where people say, oh, I'm not so interested, or I don't know if we can actually do it, or whatever. We can. It's just making sure you understand that it doesn't have to be big, formal stuff. Just asking little, interesting questions makes a huge difference. So I want to finish by saying, sorry, very simple. Sirius really kind of became part of the community just in, well, since the Squash project started, basically. Have I got time for an anecdote?
You've got time for an anecdote.
Great, I've got time for an anecdote. The anecdote is, how did Sirius become a KDE4 supporting member? Well, the deal was very simple. It involved 5 half-naked wet men drinking beer on a beach in Greece. Two of them suggested to 2 people from my company that it would be a good idea. And the whole situation was very compromising. We decided it probably would. We're a free software services integrator. We actually do very little work on the desktop. Actually, it's near enough none. However, KDE is the enterprise class desktop, and we really as a company want to do what we can to help make things better, help make things easier. So, you know, as a supporting member, you know, we pay some money to EV, but really we want to do other stuff as well, and the research is kind of as part of that. So we're proud to be a supporter of the EV, and we really want to thank you for the work that you've done as developers of KDE. KDE4 is conceptually quite phenomenal. 4.0 is a really good start, and you know, we're all really looking forward to what's going to come with 4.1 and beyond. So I really just want to thank you all, and just to say well done.
Thank you, Paul. We've got a couple of minutes for questions. Celeste, would you want to say something about the research you do?
Say yes. Say yes, and you win the big cash prize.
It's £1, you know. Here, I'll let him ask a question first.
So you'd mentioned that an advantage free software has is that large companies have shareholders, but we have an equivalent to that in our user community who also often fear change. Now we can choose to ignore them and we won't necessarily be destroyed, but that is a consideration.
Absolutely. Now we don't necessarily have to deliver the craziness. To give you an example, kind of like from my own background, for a while I was a Zope and Plone developer, and Zope went through basically an internal fork where they said, Zope 2 is quite good, we want to be more like Ruby on Rails, so we're going to call that Zope 3. And it was quite a, and it wasn't just a number shift, it was really quite a massive change in the philosophy of the project and things like this. And yeah, that hurt, because there was a whole lot of users who said, what's this Zope 3 nonsense? And so the Zope 2 stuff is still under active development. But Zope 3 is now mature, it's nice, people are using it or whatever. So there's an example of where quite a radical change in the project eventually delivered something quite nice. Something we do have the time to do in the free software community, we can have the time to do rather in the free software community, is to do stuff that we don't necessarily deliver. Experimentation in crazy stuff is something that we can certainly do and not necessarily have to deliver. And we really shouldn't be afraid to do that. So we can invest time into doing stuff like this. And it can just be like little bits of chunks at a time, just to see what happens and not necessarily have to deliver it, whereas the big companies really can't afford to do that.
So this might at first sound like kind of a joke question, but I'm actually serious about it.
I love
Uh,
joke questions.
You were talking like a lot at the beginning of your talk about interface design and desktop. In all seriousness, what are your thoughts on Microsoft Bob?
Okay. What are my thoughts on Microsoft Bob? Microsoft Bob. Okay, you have to give me a second. Microsoft Bob was colorful and probably didn't get as much attention as probably people should have paid to it. That's the Paul Adams Serious Corporation political answer. No, seriously, I think it was colorful and people didn't pay enough attention to it.
Hi, I bought one of Sirius Cybernetics Nutramatic drink dispenser. It never makes my tea right. Please help.
Sirius Cybernetics actually made the doors on the.
Well, you're just happy when you get through their superficial design flaws, and then you encounter the fundamental design
Yes.
flaws. Did we have other questions out here?
Don't be afraid.
Don't be afraid.
Hi, my name is Celeste Lynn Paul, and I work with the KDE Usability Project, also Kubuntu, and I'm on the KDE HCI working group. And some of the research I do isn't necessarily tech-oriented, such as in code, but it's more on the ends of the users. We do a lot of, the group and professionally, we do a lot of usability testing, a lot of interaction design, and testing a lot of new interface concepts, a lot of the stuff similar to Plasma, new ideas, to try to test these out before we spend all the time coding. I don't know what else they want me to say, but I guess I do research. It's just in a little bit different realm than what Sirius does.
So we have research in all. Sorry, I zapped you. We have research in all corners and all directions of human endeavor. That's cool. Alexander.
Hi. So, oh, God. All right. So, we in the open office community do a lot of research and development. We actually, the community is a lot of people that has nothing to do with technology. They're marketers. They're different type of, they're lawyers. They're different type of disciplines, and they come and they say, well, we have our very particular demands for open office. Now, one thing that we have been, and this is more like an internal project management question, is how, one thing that we have been seeing challenging is how can we translate that into code without burning out our resources on really important development that is basically going into stabilizing the Office suite or stabilizing the project. And as a project manager, I think I would like to know what's your perspective on that situation, since I think you may have seen yourself into that or something.
So I think sort of the abstract level of that question is, how do you manage the time and resources to do slightly risky stuff? I think it's kind of the abstract version of that question. There's numerous answers which I'll share with you over a beer, but I'll share with you the easiest one. Get external funding. Either talk to existing sponsors of the project, go to people like the European Commission, who are constantly looking for projects which meet certain guidelines, talk to the National Science Foundation in the United States and do the same thing, because what that will inevitably get you do is the financial resources to then take some of the burden off the subsequent work. You can basically pay some of your developers to do the work that they've been doing forever as a job. So you free up more of their time to spend on the project and things like that. So I'd suggest one of the easiest ways from the project management perspective of getting into R&D early on is to get external funding to help free up your human resource or get more time from your human resource to do stuff with things. But there are other ways, but that's a beer conversation.
Okay, thank you, Paul. once again.